Abusia anka onipa bia benya na okura natural ahoden te se papai a wapiem ewo Kenya ono de na hoden a okura no odi firi esoro eye natural a nyame ede adom no a cars fa no so nipa 50 etimi etight omo etwe na abra ontimi emove inch opai bo te se de opai o tepipam or the motors mienu etimi tight etwe no abra motors ni mienu nyina entimi ntu otwe motors ni nyina or the nense etwe car a chese no hu yie pa na omutimi di anwea kotoku ebeye 10 egu no so so ngina no so onya atenka bia na otimi ebu dadoa 6 inches dadoa na abrantie eye hwan ye friend Patrick a wapie ewo Kenya mam na yen hyase na yen koka na asem kakra. The real story of Patrick, oye the giant from Kenya. Papa nipa bia entimi entenase. Nipa ordenance etweka na enkrofo bi ehunu se oye beyi. Ebi nso hunu se oye bonsam bia waba bepiem. Na nokore wom ne se Patrick eye abode soronko. Adoma chede anyame ede ache no ene na hoden. Na papa ewo 43 years onya akwala na nkrofo bi entenase nanso papai odidi te se normal nipa senia nipa edidi pepepe na ofri Nairobis Kagondo village ehɔ na eye papai efri enti abusia moma yento yebo na yenkotie story about Patrick eye giant of Kenya.
But Patrick, he just wants to live his life, and through it all one person has stood by his side, his wife. She watches in amazement every time Patrick does something impossible, and even though the world doubts him, she never does. But today, we won't be the ones telling his story. He will. For those who find some parts of his life unbelievable, maybe they are, but let's hear it from Patrick himself.
Naitwa Patrick Chege Kariuki.
My name is Patrick Chege Kariuki, but people call me Rhino Power. I come from Kenya, Nairobi. I represent Kenya, and I'm sure nobody can challenge me in this country because I believe in myself. Beside me is my wife, the woman God blessed me with, Gladys Chege. I was born here in Kagondo village. This is where I train. This is where I do everything.
Patrick is the kind of man whose strength and ability could be celebrated globally. But instead of chasing fame, he chose to stay true to his roots. Now, when we hear the word giant, we imagine something terrifying, an enormous, intimidating, and unstoppable force. But Patrick is not just a giant, he's an adorable giant. He speaks calmly, he carries himself with ease, but when it comes to heavy lifting, he's the man you call.
Vile nilijua niko na nguvu.
I knew I had this strength 6 years ago. I met a man who had a flat tire, but his jack wasn't working. When I helped him, he was shocked. He couldn't believe I lifted the car without any assistance. He had never seen anything like it.
Of course, the man was shocked. Honestly, who wouldn't be? Imagine standing next to someone who can lift a whole car with his bare hands. That is the definition of intimidating.
Tulikosana cause alianza kusema mimi.
We actually argued. The man told me I wasn't normal. He refused to let me come near him because in his mind, only a jack could lift a car. He thought I was a witch. He even asked me if I was a ghost. I told him, no, I'm just a man.
This might be the funniest compliment Patrick has ever received, being mistaken for a ghost because of his strength.
I didn't mean to scare him. I only wanted to help because the place was dangerous and it was already 9:30 p.m. That was the first time I used my
Kamia kwayese the new Samson ana abe PM ewo Africa. Ai Samson na yete nka ewo Bible mu no. We de ye penso ye Samson ni ana abe PM wo Africa chese oya nwanwade a wode ne nse ebunda doa chese cars na o maso na o peja ye de boato no so pai onte hwe chese ye new Samson abe PM ewo ye penso yi.
Nirudi nyuma kidogo.
Going back to my childhood, I was always different. At just 8 years old, I was doing chores meant for grown men, carrying heavy loads of cow grass, lifting things other kids couldn't. In school, when we played tug of war, I would go against 4 or 5 kids at once and still win. That's when I started testing myself. I would fill a sack with soil, tie it up, and drag it across the ground, 50 meters at a time, and every time I added more weight. Now I'm 43 years old, but back then I was just a kid, only 10 or 11 years old.
Let's take a moment here. A 10-year-old boy pulling sacks of soil like they were nothing. This proves one thing. Patrick's strength was never an accident. It was never a condition. He was born this way. And honestly, that is the closest thing to a miracle. Now, here's the big question. How do people react to your strength today?
Sasa waliona hii kitu haibadiliki.
Right now, the people around me are used to my strength because they have seen that it has never changed over the years. At first, my neighbors were surprised. Imagine a 10-year-old boy pushing a car out of the mud alone. It didn't make sense to them.
In general, people don't pay much attention to kids or their abilities. Maybe that's why no one truly noticed Patrick's strength in the beginning. But fast forward to today and the world is watching. So, when did his strength finally become undeniable?
Nikiwa tu mdogo.
My parents noticed my strength before I even turned 10. I was the eldest, so I had to help my mother with chores. If she was sick, I took over. I remember one time when my mother went to the hospital to give birth, my father still had to go to work, so I managed everything, feeding the cows, cleaning, cooking, everything. I was only 10 years old.
It's not just his body that's strong. Patrick has a strong mind too. Handling all household responsibility at 10 years old, that's not just impressive, that's unbelievable. But let's think about this for a second. Having a man this powerful around, does it make people feel safe or does it make them afraid?
Manake
people never saw me as a threat because of how I was raised. I was taught to use my strength for good. Just 2 days ago, I met a woman surrounded by thugs. They had guns and knives, but I still managed to save her.
Patrick was picking up our daughter from school when he saw a woman being attacked. The thugs had knives. They told him to step out of the car, and he did. Patrick grabbed one of them and broke his arm on the spot. The rest ran away in fear, but then they came back. They asked themselves, how did one man defeat us? So they tried again, and guess what? Patrick took down all 4 of them. By the time people arrived, the woman was screaming and all the thugs were arrested.
Using your power to help people is something very few can do. But Patrick doesn't just have raw strength, he has control. Which makes us wonder, have you ever trained? Have you learned any techniques?
Kickboxing.
I trained in kickboxing, even though I never had a mentor.
Wait, what? No mentor, no coach? Then how did you train yourself?
I had to create my own weights because I couldn't afford to buy them. For my legs, I did sit-ups. For endurance, my wife takes me jogging every morning. We train together. She has been my biggest supporter. One day, I wanted to see what my teeth could handle, so I tried breaking a 6-inch nail, and I did. Even now, I can snap a 6-inch nail in half with my bare hands.
A 6-inch nail? We had to take a moment to process this information. Imagine how people who actually saw this in real life must have felt. But in all our time with Patrick, one thing became very clear. There's one person who stands beside him no matter what. Gladys, his rock, his biggest supporter. And we believe that when the world talks about Kenya's strongest man, they should also talk about the woman who stands beside him. So, Gladys, tell us everything. How did you meet Patrick? How did this incredible story begin? We're dying to know.
Mimi naitwa Gladys Nyaguthi Kireka.
My name is Gladys Nyaguthi Kereka. I was born in Laikipia West in a place called Dingarwa, where I also studied. As I grew up, I became a police officer. My first posting was in Loitoktok, but later I was transferred to Nairobi to a place called Gachui in Dagoretti sub-county. And that's where I met Mr. Chege. Our meeting wasn't planned, it was a God-sent coincidence. My sister, who was sick, was his friend. Patrick offered to take her to the hospital and she asked me to come along. That's how we met. The moment Patrick saw me, he told me he loved me, and the rest, well, the rest is history.